Every morning, I sit down at my desk with the same intention. Today, I'm finally gonna get things done. But within minutes, I'm gone. I'm scattered all over the place. A tab leads to another tab, a note leads to another idea, and let me quickly check becomes 20 minutes. And this isn't just a bad day, this is every day for me. And I kept telling to myself that it's just me, I'm overwhelmed, or I need discipline in my life. Then I started talking to other people, and every single one gave me the same thing. My brain feels broken in this modern time. So I did what any filmmaker who really struggles in sleeping would do. I started digging research papers, expert interviews, and then a study from Stanford that stopped me cold. Multitasking doesn't just distract us, it damages working memory. So that means that problem isn't we're lazy. The problem is way more systematic than what we think. There is something in the world that is actively rewiring our attention. If this is happening to all of us, who exactly benefits from a world full of unfocused minds? And more importantly, is there a way out of it?
How much time do you spend doing this?
It felt like with each year that passed, doing things that required deep focus, like reading a book, were more and more like running up and down escalators.
This is how we pay attention to the world around us and how much control we have over
We are amusing ourselves to death.
Here's something I only realized after starting to make this video. Our brain not only thinks in sentences, it thinks in tabs. Let me explain. Every thought opens another window. Every idea becomes a new tab, and before we know it, we're not thinking, we're buffering. When Stanford actually studied multitasking, they found something terrifying. Heavy multitaskers weren't better at it, they were worse at filtering information, worse at switching tasks, worse at remembering things. And this wasn't a temporary overload, it was structural. The constant switching permanently weakened the system responsible for attention and memory. So the problem isn't that we're juggling too much, it's that the world keeps throwing us more. We live inside a machine built to fracture us. Social media, streaming, notifications, deadlines, they all run on the same currency, if you will, your attention. But attention isn't infinite. It's a muscle with a breaking point. In the 1990s, the average adult could focus on a single task for about 2 to 3 minutes before switching. Today, it's less than 30 seconds. Not because we've evolved, but because we've adapted to a world designed for interruption. And the cost isn't productivity, the cost is depth. I thought that this was only my problem until I started reading interviews from people across the world. Students in Japan who can't focus and can't finish their homeworks without checking their phones every few minutes. A barista in Paris who watches TikToks while customers order. This isn't individual failure, this is global conditioning. Think about this. When you open a web page, the cursor always expects a new input. That's how our minds work now. Always waiting for the next thing, the next message, the next task, the next distraction, if you will. Cognitive scientists call this attention fragmentation. Every switch, no matter how small, carries a cost. 20 seconds of refocus repeated hundreds of times a day. And the worst part? We are normalizing this feeling. The burnout haze at noon, if you will, the mental fog even after coffee. These aren't personality traits, they're symptoms. Symptoms of a world built to outrun our biology. That's the tension we're investigating. It's not why I can't focus, but what changed in the world that made focusing unnatural? Because if we understand that, maybe we can start understanding how to rebuild on this. Our world didn't accidentally become distracting. It was engineered, and once you follow the trails far enough, you start to see a pattern. A global economy that thrives when your attention fractures. To understand why focusing feels impossible, you have to understand who benefits when you cannot. And the first clue shows up not in our behavior, but in the numbers. Over the last 20 years, the global economy shifted from produced goods to producing attention. Platforms discovered something wild. If you keep people switching rapidly between posts, videos, messages, their brain becomes more predictable. Predictability is profitable. And companies don't need your deep attention, they need your shallow one. The kind that scrolls, taps, refreshes, repeats. This isn't addiction by accident. This is a behavioral economics done en masse. Psychologists at the University of Chicago found that intermittent rewards, the unpredictable, maybe the next thing is going to be good pattern, triggers more dopamine than consistent rewards. That's the model behind modern feeds. Every swipe is a gamble, every notification is a maybe, and every distraction is a revenue. Not for you, but for the system. When you open a news article or scroll a feed, your attention is sold at auction. Dozens of companies bid on you, not because they want your money, because they want your mind share. They don't care about what you focus on, just that you don't stay focused for long. Because the longer you remain in shallow attention, the more auctions they can run. Your distraction is someone else's business model, and the world has rearranged itself around this business. Countries now compete for influence through digital time. The US exports social platforms, China exports entire attention ecosystem, Europe regulates, India engineers scale, Africa leapfrogs into mobile-first realities. Every nation is shaping or being shaped by the economics of focus. And the rules of this global marketplace are simple. If you keep people engaged, you gain power. If you let people think deeply, they might question that power. That's why algorithms don't show what's meaningful most of the time. They show what's sticky. The entire system is designed to keep your mind into motion without ever letting you arrive anywhere. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Earlier we talked about how our minds now think in tabs, but here's a deeper layer to that. The modern economy didn't just fragment our minds, it normalized fragmentation as productivity. We call it multitasking. But in neuroscience, it's known by a less flattering name, task switching cost. Every time you switch tasks, your brain must upload the previous context, load a new one, suppress internal noise, recalibrate working memory. The process takes 20 to 25 seconds, even after switching back. Multiply that by 100 of switches a day, and you realize something. Most people aren't overwhelmed. They're being eroded. Losing focus feels personal, but statistically, it's too common to be individual. We are seeing the same symptoms in Sao Paulo, Seoul, Paris, Delhi, New York. No matter which country you choose, it's the same thing. Shorter attention spans, difficulty reading long texts, anxiety around starting tasks, constant urge to check devices. This isn't cultural variation, this is global synchronization, but the kind nobody asked for. If everything is distracting us and somebody is profiting, and entire societies are showing the same symptoms, then the problem might not be how do I focus better. The real question becomes, why did the world decide that deep focus was no longer useful? When we talk about the internet, we picture apps, websites, scrolling thumbs, but the actual system, the hardware, the databases, the models, was built with a single priority. Keep attention moving, never let it settle, and once you see how this is engineered, every notification, every feed, every algorithm stops feeling like a habit and starts looking like a design. Casinos learned this decades ago that humans stay longer in environments without clocks, exits, and endings. Tech companies borrowed this playbook. Infinite scrolling, that's a slot machine liver. Pull, refresh, maybe this time something good appears. Autoplay, it's removing the exit door. You think you're choosing, but the next video has already chosen you. This is the first layer of architecture, loop design. Every feature is built to eliminate friction. The small pauses when your brain could reclaim control, your ability to stay engaged, if you will, is the product, and the ability to stop is a threat. Behind every screen you touch is a pipeline that predicts the next thing you want, down to the millisecond, if you will. The pipeline looks like data, prediction, ranking, delivery, measurement, adjustment, and repeat. But here's the twist. The system isn't predicting what's meaningful. It predicts what keeps you here. That's why you get more extreme versions of your interest, shorter content that you intended, emotionally spiky posts, if you will. Positive emotions keep users, but negative emotions move them faster. And the architecture prefers movement. In engineering terms, this is called engagement maximization. In human terms, this is called exhaustion. Every time you switch apps, switch tasks, check messages, tap notifications, your brain pays a tax. Cognitive scientists call this attention residue. Even after switching tasks, a fragment of the previous task lingers in our brain, slowing down to the new one. Not metaphorically, but literally it's measurable. And the system knows this, and they kind of rely on it because a distracted mind is easier to redirect than a focused one. This is why every platform competes to be the first interruption. Not the best platform, but the loudest one. When a model learns about your behavior, it's also learning everyone's behavior, which means your attention patterns feed into a global feedback loop that shapes what billions of people see next. World events get filtered. Not because of importance, but because of the likelihood of engagement. If you were wondering why world feels more chaotic, more urgent, more divided, this is one reason. Architecture amplifies whatever travels faster, not what matters the most. The outrage, the fear, the spectacle, they travel faster than nuances. The last layer is the quietest one, if you will. It's the black market of attention economy. Not illegal, but invincible. Third-party trackers, data brokers, hidden analytics, advertising exchanges. Every site that you visit talks to a dozen of other sites, if you will. You leave a trail, that trail builds a profile. The profile fuels predictions, the predictions guide content, the content shapes preferences, the preferences become patterns become identity, all without you choosing a single step. The architecture isn't imprisoning us, it's studying us, then teaching itself how to keep us inside the maze using our own tendencies, if you will. At this point in the investigation, something becomes painfully clear. A distracted world isn't a glitch in civilization, it's a profitable equilibrium. But here's the interesting part, and the part that turns the whole documentary, if you will. The more we understand the system, the more one question grows louder. If the architecture is good at capturing our attention, could we use the same architecture to reclaim it? Up until now, every clue pointed outward. Algorithms, pipelines, tools, designs, but something wasn't adding up. If the architecture is this efficient, if the systems are this optimized, why do some people resist it while others drown in it? Not everyone gets hijacked in the same way. This was the break in the investigation, because if the architecture was the villain, we'd all be equally helpless, but we're not. And that means the problem isn't just technological, it's biological. The missing variable is the mental bandwidth, not intelligence, not willpower, not discipline, bandwidth. And then the analogy becomes too perfect to ignore. Our mind don't collapse because it's weak. They collapse because they're overloaded by pressure, uncertainty, by expectations, fears, unfinished tasks. Every unresolved worry is an open tab. Most of us are running with 50, 60, or even 100 tabs open before we even pick up the phone, which means the architecture isn't hijacking an empty brain, it's hijacking a crowded one. And that changes the whole story. Platforms don't target your weaknesses, they target your vulnerabilities. A mind under emotional load is easier to destabilize. A mind under chronic stress is easier to interrupt. No villainy is needed in these kind of stuff, just opportunity. For the first time, I started to see the architecture a bit differently here. Not as a predator, but as a mirror. A mirror reflecting how fragmented, anxious, and stretched we already are. It's not the algorithm that scatters us, it's the life we're carrying around with us before the algorithm even shows up. Cognitive science has a blunt explanation. We have limited attentional capacity. The prefrontal cortex, the part that handles focus, isn't built for juggling 30 decisions, switching tasks every single minute, or scanning an endless feed, tracking notifications, worrying about your future, navigating global news, maintaining a digital identity, comparing yourself to 500,000 people on a daily basis, which is really bad. That's not a modern problem, that's a design problem. We evolved from scarcity, we live in abundance. The gap between biology and environment is where attention is collapsing, and the pattern, they operate inside that gap, not by forcing us to look, but by showing us the exact moment when our overloaded mind needs a break, and offering the fastest, easiest escape. The internet doesn't steal our focus, it catches its falling. This changed the investigation a bit, to be honest, because if the architecture worked, then the real question isn't why is the internet so distracting, it's why are we carrying so much that distraction becomes relief? What happens to our time, our mental space, our sense of enough, our emotional bandwidth, if you will? Once I understood that distraction wasn't a flaw in us, but a system of overload, the whole investigation shifted in a way. Because overload isn't abstract, it's literally measurable. Most people today aren't struggling with focus, they're struggling with capacity. Mental capacity, emotional capacity, cognitive capacity. The problem isn't that we can't pay attention. It's that our attention has nowhere left to land. There is no space for it. Studies from Harvard, MIT, and psychologists keep pointing to one uncomfortable truth. Scarcity of time, energy, or emotional space creates tunnel vision. And here's the twist, if you will. You don't need to be poor to experience scarcity. You just need too many demands and not enough bandwidth. You can have emails, health, bills, global news, family, career, identity, uncertainty about the future, unresolved conversations, unfinished work, each one quietly occupying parts of your mind. And when too many accumulate, your brain enters survival mode. Not exactly fight or flight mode, but a fragment or fall apart mode. This is a kind of scarcity psychologists call cognitive load. It narrows your mental field until only the most immediate, easiest, low effort options feels available. This was the first solid scientific answer to the question we've been circling around. Why do simple tasks feel impossible? Because they're not simple anymore. They're happening in a crowded room. When your brain reaches capacity, you feel it as you're lazy, I can't get anything done, I can't focus, I'm falling behind, I'm not disciplined. They're load indicators, if you will. A stressed brain does not underperform, it reallocates. And when the brain reallocates, creativity drops, persistence drops, motivation drops, focus drops. Not because you're broken, but because your mind is protecting itself. This was the second major shift in the investigation, if you will. Here's something the data makes brutally clear. Our mental load keeps growing because the world keeps expanding. More information, more decision, more identity to maintain, more responsibilities to juggle, if you will, more expectations to fulfill. Work follows us back home, news follows us back to our bedrooms, notification follows us literally everywhere we go. And each new responsibility does not replace the old one that we had, it just stacks on top. This accumulation explains something important. You're not distracted because the task is boring, you're distracted because the world is loud and your brain is literally full. When I finally understood the real problem, not distraction, not laziness, but capacity, the investigation changed its direction, if you will. Because if the mind isn't a machine that needs more discipline, then what is it? You can say a mind is closer to a room, if you will. And like any other room, it fills up unless you design it otherwise. This is the part no productivity book ever explained clearly because your brain isn't following your environment is unplanned. If you don't design the environment, it designs you. So the chapter isn't about productivity, it's about architecture in a way. Every human culture builds physical system to handle complexities. Libraries have cataloging, cities have zoning, studios has departments. But inside our minds, most of us still use the equivalent of a cardboard box, labeled everything. Cognitive scientists call this a mixed load system. It's what happens when very difficult types of tasks, emotions, and deadlines all compute for the same mental shelf. You don't have too many tasks, you have too few containers. And so everything spills into everything. Urban planners use a concept called desire lines. The unofficial paths people naturally take through grass or pavement when the official route doesn't work. Your mind has desire lines too. If tasks have no designed place, the brain reroutes constantly, and every reroute costs attention. What we call mind wandering is often just a brain trying to reorganize tasks that has nowhere to belong. This is where real fatigue comes from. Every time your brain must ask, when should I do this? What is the priority? Do I have time? Will I forget this? You burn cognitive fuel. Multiply that with 50 micro decisions per day, and suddenly you're exhausted before lunch. That exhaustion is not emotional, it's pretty much architectural, if you will. One strange thing that you can find is most adults function without a coherent workflow system. Not because we don't want one, but because no one teaches us how to design one. We're told to write to-do lists, use calendars, apps, but no one explains the foundational truth, if you will. Tools don't create orders. Without mental architecture, apps become clutter, planning becomes guilt, calendars is basically stress. Which means the investigation was now pointing towards an uncomfortable conclusion. If the mind is overloaded, fixing it isn't about adding more effort, it's about removing friction. Not discipline, design. Across various fields, if you will, aviation, surgery, journalism, filmmaking, there's a pattern among people who withstand high load environments without burning out. They don't reduce responsibilities, they reduce randomness. Their world isn't lighter, it's well structured. Every one of these systems does the same thing. They reduce cognitive load by reducing improvisation, which leads to the central insight of this whole chapter, if you will, that the opposite of chaos isn't discipline, it's structure. Discipline is the last resort to it. Structure is the foundation. When you realize the mind has limits, And I'm not talking about emotional limits or moral limits, but more of an architectural limits, if you will. There's a moment of silence, not defeat, but recognition. And this isn't a story about turning yourself into a machine. It's a story about designing a room that you can finally breathe in. And that's where we begin. Not with disciplines, not with apps, but with table and a chair and a question we ended on. Where does this belong? The first discovery in this chapter was immediate. The human brain can't organize abstractions, it organizes surfaces. Surfaces are decisions made visible. Surfaces are what let a city function, a military operate, a film set run on time. Every chaotic life begins with one missing thing: no surface where decision can land. So we build one. This is the first rule of the system we are building. Everything invisible becomes visible. Thoughts leave the mind and land on the table. Before categories, before folders, before calendars, we need the physical act of transfer. Because the brain is not designed for storage, it's designed for movement, and movement requires space. Every functioning system in the world, from air traffic control to film production, has three containers. Thing that happens once, things that happens repeatedly, things that arrive unexpectedly. And that's about it, to be honest. And everything in the modern life fits with these three shapes. So instead of asking, how do I finish everything, we should ask ourselves, what shape is it? This alone removes half of the friction in our human lives. Number A, projects. Projects are anything with an end point. They're not overwhelming because they're hard, they're overwhelming because they float. A floating task has no gravity, and gravity is what makes work feel real. So each project gets anchored in one line. What is the next physical action? Projects move when the next step is touchable. Number B, routines. Routines are systems that save cognitive toil. They aren't habits. Habits are more internal, if you will. Routines are external rhythms. Without rhythms, life feels like improvisation, and improvisation is expensive. Routines are obligations, they're guardrails, they turn cliffs into pathways, if you will. And finally, number C, the chaotic world. This is the container no one builds. It's a container that saves the system. Every interruption, every day, every I'll deal with it later goes here. You don't decide, you don't sort, you don't judge, you capture. Decisions happen later. The single behavior cuts mental load more effectively than any productivity method ever invented. Because now the brain knows nothing is forgotten, nothing lives in a limbo. This is the engine of the system. A 15 minutes reset where the containers get sorted, inbox emptied, projects updated, routines adjusted. Not perfection, maintenance. Cities don't stay organized because citizens behave. Cities stays organized because someone maintains the system. This weekly reset is a city planning of our minds, if you will. The calendar is sacred ground. It holds two things: fixed events, deadlines. Not ambitions, not tasks, not I should probably edit here. Everything else is flexible and belongs in containers, not time slots. Time blocking is optional, clarity is not. A calendar without clutter is a mind without guilt, if you will. The moment the system clicked was quiet. Not dramatic, not motivational, just I could breathe again, if you will. For the first time in months. I wasn't carrying everything at once. There was space between thoughts, a structure behind a day. And in that structure, you rediscover something you lose when you're overwhelmed: agency. Not control, that's an illusion, if you will. Just clarity, enough to move, enough to choose. The system isn't about productivity, it's about protection. From the silent pressure to remember everything. The goal isn't to do more. The goal is simple: to make life breathable again. Because once the system holds the chaos, your mind is free to do things it was built for, which is to think, to imagine, to create, to live. It's easy to be organized in a vacuum. It's harder when your day is a collision of interruptions, delays, unexpected responsibilities, and the random chaos of simply being alive. This chapter is where we take everything we built and test it against real conditions we live in. Not the ideal week, but an actual one. The week where things break. The first sign that system works is when it breaks. Because before this, everything broke invisibly, inside our heads. Now the pressure has a place to land. When something goes wrong, a task explodes, a deadline shifts, someone else's emergency becomes yours. You don't collapse into chaos, you open the room and move one tile. That's the difference. Before, chaos lived in you. Now chaos is just another item in your system. Here's the secret that productivity gurus never tell you. A plan is not a promise. It's scaffolding. When something disrupts the day, and it probably will, you don't fight, you reassign it. Containers let you safely move work without mentally pushing yourself. If you lose a morning to an emergency, you shift the container to an afternoon, not another day entirely. There's no guilt or no spiraling, if you will, just architecture responding to gravity. The modern world loves open loops, notifications, tabs, feeds, messages, but the system only survives when doors close. Focus isn't built through motivation, it's built through constraints. To protect the system, we use 3 simple rules: 1 tab, 1 task, 1 window. Not forever, just inside the container. When the container closes, you're done. This protects you from the illusion that everything is urgent and nothing can wait. Because now the room tells you what matters, not your adrenaline. You get the point. A good day proves nothing. Anyone can be organized when life cooperates. The real test is a bad day. The day when you wake up tired, every message feels urgent, and your brain slips back to a survival mode. On that day, the system shows its true value. You don't fix your mood, you don't fix the day, you just follow the map. The brain doesn't want to think on a bad day, so you remove the thinking entirely. This is why the system exists, not for productivity, but more so for protection. And this is the most unexpected part, because when you build a personal system, you end up building a world system. If you create containers, you start respecting time. If you respect time, you start saying no. And if you say no, you start having boundaries. If you have boundaries, you stop absorbing everybody else's chaos. And that ripple doesn't stop with you. It reshapes your surrounding, and other people adjust. Workflows stabilize, if you will. Demand stops creeping into every hour of your life. You aren't just creating order internally, you're teaching the world how to interact with you. The strangest part of this process is when the system stops feeling like a system and starts feeling like a story. Your tasks become chapters, your days become scenes, your weeks become arcs. Suddenly life feels authored. And when the world throws something unexpected at you, you don't generally panic in these kind of situations. You simply write the next scene. If you zoom out far enough, our personal chaos stops looking personal at all. It looks designed not by a person, but a system that grew up faster than our nervous system ever could. A system that demands attention, consumes time, and rewards urgency over depth. Most of the human history moved at the speed of walking. Even 100 years ago, our world was the radius of our street, our office, our town. Today, the world sits inside our pockets and demands attention every minute. We don't multitask because we're bad at focus. We multitask because the world faces it. Economists call this the attention economy. Neuroscientists call this cognitive overload. You and researchers call it the digital burnout era. You and I call it a normal Tuesday. Your brain is built for a world that barely exists anymore. It evolved for linear tasks, physical environments, and predictable rhythms, not pings, timelines, and 500 open loops a day. The mismatch between biology and technology creates a constant sense of falling behind. This is not failure, this is an adaptation lag. Somewhere in the last 20 years or so, being busy became a global identity. Companies optimized for output, city optimized for speed, platforms optimized for engagement, and people optimize themselves until they broke. This isn't cultural, but it's structural, like I said time and time again. Work doesn't end anymore, it expands to fill every device, every hour, every room of our lives. The old idea of time off evaporated, the boundary collapsed, if you will. And when boundary disappears, system collapses with them. We're drowning in stimuli, if you will, information, noise, opinions, micro conflicts, micro dopamine hits, but we're starving emotionally. The paradox is it's universal. We're more networked than any generation before us, but we are more lonelier than almost every generation ever measured. That loneliness shows up in our workflow as procrastination, distraction, burnout. It's not a productivity issue, it's a human one, if you will. Because the brain prioritizes connection over accomplishments. When connection is missing, our mind searches for substitutes like scrolling, switching, spiraling. Our systems collapse because we are trying to work in a world where the emotional battery never fully charges. The world doesn't operate in local time anymore, it runs in a global one. Your boss might be asleep when you're working, your colleagues might be waking up when you're calling, your news cycle never ends, your competition is no longer your city, it's every time zone. This creates a subtle pressure. The world is always moving. But no human life can match a 24/7 global rhythm. As we all know, information became infinite, but meaning stayed scarce, if you will, because we know more than ever and understand less. The more fragmented your attention, the less context your memory builds. We become experts in details and beginners in depth. This is the real reason we lose focus. The world bombards us with signals but starves us with coherence, if you will. And without coherence, we can't build a structured inner life. Not a workflow, not a system, not even a sense of self, if you will. There comes a point in every investigation where the story turns inward, where the evidence stops pointing out there and starts pointing back to you, in this case me. And this is that moment because understanding a world's chaos is one thing, living inside it is completely different. Here's the first truth I kinda had to accept. My nervous system has a maximum speed and it's slower than everything around me. And this isn't exactly what I call a weakness, it's physiology. Your brain can't jump between tasks without friction. Your attention cannot operate like a browser with 36 tabs open all the time. The world may run on a broadband speed, but your nervous system runs in a human speed, which is kind of fucked up, but it is what it is. And human speed is deliberate, cyclical, limited, alive. And the moment you accept this, your entire approach to this focus changes in a way, and it stops being a war and becomes an architecture. And while I was preparing for this, my life felt like 1,000 half-started threads. A script here, a documentary there, a French lesson somewhere in between. All important, none visible. And when things stop being visible, they stop being manageable. The simplest solution I found didn't come from productivity books, it came from architecture. Every structure, every bridge, every building begins with a single diagram, a load map. What holds weight, what supports what, where does stress go? Your life works in the same way, basically. If everything depends on you, everything collapses on you. So I built my own load map, 3 pillars, nothing exciting, nothing more than that. Work I do for the world, work I do for myself, and work I do for future. Everything I care about had to fit inside these 3 boxes. Anything that it didn't fit in these 3 items wasn't mine to carry. One of the biggest reasons why we spiral is because our life has rhythm, but our schedules don't. We wake, work, rest, repeat, but the hours in between are unstructured, leaky, and shapeless, if you will. And unstructured time is where anxiety grows. Psychologists call this temporal dissonance. Your tasks don't match your hours don't match your energy, and your energy doesn't match the demand placed on it. So I rebuilt my day around cycles, not tasks. Focus, rest, execute, reflect. And I keep each cycle short. Not because I'm weak, because the brain prefers compact containers. A task becomes easier when it lives inside time instead of floating above it. And once your day has structure, your mind has somewhere to sit. Every productivity system online promises perfection. No one wants to hear the fact that our system needs to break. Often, as a matter of fact, because you change, your goals change, your circumstances changes, and any system that can't break cannot evolve. So now I don't design workflows to be efficient, I design them to be flexible. For months I've been trying to eliminate distraction. It never worked out because distraction isn't the enemy, it's a signal. It tells you something very vital that you need to listen. Your brain is seeking stimulus because the task you're doing doesn't have one. So instead of eliminating distraction, you reroute it. 5 minutes of distraction every hour, on purpose. A place where my brain can wander safely without derailing my entire day. You design lanes for your attention and it doesn't crash into everything around it. Now, what I'm going to talk about is something that I struggle constantly. Every major workflow study from MIT to Oxford shows the same pattern. People don't succeed alone. Not because of weakness, but because we are hardwired to share cognition. The lone genius myth doesn't work anymore because the world has become too complex. Nature solves complexity with network, not individuals. When I began this project, I thought I was chasing productivity. I wasn't. I was chasing a center point, a place where my inner life and outer life would finally meet. And the truth is, you don't need a new calendar, a new app, or a new workflow, if you will. You need a new center, a stable point in your life where everything else can orbit without chaos. And once that center point exists, your life stops feeling like a crisis and starts to have a shape, if you will. And shape is manageable, shape is buildable, shape is changeable without collapsing. Here's the thing that I kept avoiding, if you will. I didn't need a better workflow, I needed a better relationship with myself. You're not suffering from a shortage of discipline, we are suffering from an overdose of inputs. The wandering mind is an unhappy mind. But no one told us that the wandering isn't always our choice. So I tried something different. Not productivity hacks, not dopamine detoxes, if you will. Just 3 questions. What do I actually care about? What can I genuinely handle? And what can I put down without guilt? It sounds simple, but it's not at all. Because every time I tried to focus, it felt like a phantom pull, if you will. Like a background noise made for unfinished thoughts. And I kept imagining my brain like a metro system at rush hour, every train arriving full, every platform overcrowded, no space for more passengers, but the trains don't stop coming. I didn't need a faster system, I needed fewer trains. So I started experimenting on myself. Not huge changes, microscopic ones. 5 minutes of stillness in the morning, one task at a time, one day a week without creating anything, and suddenly something strange began. Not a dramatic transformation, not a montage-worthy rebirth, just space. We spend so much time trying to make our lives efficient, but efficiency was never the problem. Overstimulation was. The illusion that we must keep up with the world that has nothing to do with us was. So here's what I learned, slowly, reluctantly, painfully. You can't out-optimize chaos, you can only step outside it. And maybe that's where the real revolution starts. Not in some productivity system or calendar template, if you will, but in the courage to say, my mind is not a machine. Maybe the path back to a calmer mind isn't about doing more. Maybe it's about finally doing less on purpose. There's a strange contradiction we live with today. We complained about being overwhelmed inside a world designed to never stop overwhelming us. Everywhere you look, there's acceleration, faster markets, faster news cycles, faster messaging chains, faster everything. Even grief is expected to move faster now. And the result is subtle but devastating. Our internal rhythm no longer belongs to us. At some point, a new rule crept in the modern life. If you slow down, you fall behind. If you pause, you disappear. If you rest, you lose your place in line. The world isn't asking us to move faster. The world is structured so we never stop moving. This is not an accident. It's not a glitch. It's the system doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing. We are living inside what experts call an acceleration society. A world rewards speed, punishes stillness, and monetizes attention like a natural resource. But acceleration comes with a cost, and the invoice is always paid with the same currency: our time, our focus, our emotional stability. I kept thinking about something from the Harvard study. Not just that a wandering mind makes us unhappy, but that the world now creates thousands of tiny mental departures every single day. Notifications, interruptions, unfinished thoughts. No wonder it feels like our minds is always mid-sentence. The more we investigated my personal chaos, the more we uncovered the architecture behind everyone's chaos. It wasn't just me in 40 open tabs, it was the world generating them for us, expecting us to hold them, punishing us when we drop them. So I started asking a different question. What if the problem isn't that we can't focus? And what if the problem is that we're trying to focus inside a world designed to break focus? And we found something weird. Every expert says the same thing. Our brains were never built for the speed. They were built to respond instantly to every piece of stimulus. They weren't built to simultaneously care about what's happening in our room and what's happening in 190 countries. We've stretched the bandwidth of being human and then blamed ourselves for frying. So if we want to reclaim our minds, we can't just optimize our lives. We have to understand the environment we're living in and then make choices that resist it. Not by abandoning technology, not by leaving societies, but by refusing to let the world set our rhythm for us. Because at some point we stopped asking a very old question: what pace should a human life actually move at? And maybe that's where the path towards clarity begins. I wasn't looking for a productivity fix, I wasn't looking for a perfect schedule, I wasn't even looking for focus. What I was really searching for was a way to feel human again, to move through the day without feeling like I was being pulled apart by invincible hands, to finish a thought, to breathe without calculating the next 10 tasks. They all pointed to one thing: we've built a world that overwhelms us and then blame ourselves for being overwhelmed. Attention isn't a personal flaw, it's a collective casualty. And there is a good news. Just because the world is accelerating doesn't mean that we have to match its speed. Our attention is one of the few things that is left that corporations can't automate. They need it, they profit from it, and they design an entire architecture to harvest it. Which means every moment we reclaim, every boundary we enforce, every intentional pause we create is an act of resistance. The solution isn't dramatic, it isn't quitting everything and becoming a monk, it isn't deleting every app and living in a forest. It's about creating pockets of slowness inside the world that never slows. They tell your brain you're allowed to move at your own pace, you're allowed to finish one thought before starting another, and you're allowed to be human in a system built for machines. So here's the honest conclusion, if you will. I didn't solve my chaotic workflow. I didn't fix it. I didn't master it. I learned to listen to it, to see what it was trying to tell me, and maybe that's the real answer. We don't need to control everything. We just need to notice the moments where we can choose differently and take them. The world won't slow down for us, but we can slow down inside it. And maybe that's enough to rewrite everything.